title says, it's about Sri Lanka's rich ecosystem diversity and the challenges of saving, studying, and using them. So the presentation outline would be like this. First, Sri Lanka's ecosystem diversity and the endemic flora, tree species distributions in Singaraja, World Heritage Site, at two different levels across the reserve's elevation gradient, and within a small area, what we see inside the Singaraja forest. And the third topic would be Sri Lanka's intermediate dry and arid zone forest, and the last one, a little bit on ecosystem services and human livelihoods. Right. So, um, on, on the right hand side, you can see the distribution of forests in the country, and you can see how scattered they are and in very small extents, especially in the southwestern part of the country. Then you can see when you go a little bit further into the forest, it shows different distributions again. And this is the 25 hectare plot that we have, and the distribution of different types of trees in that forest. So the presentation will be at three levels. So Sri Lanka as a whole, you can see this is on your left hand side. It is the division of agroecological zones, which are based on rainfall amount, and distribution, elevation, and soil. So based on those three factors, Sri Lanka, though very small, it's only 432 kilometers north to south and only 224 kilometers east-west. So in this small island, to have so many different agroecological zones is in a way amazing. And similarly, when we look at the floristic zones, based on the amount of different types of vegetation that we have 17 regions, and you can see the distributions there. And once again, the small island, and what is amazing also is in the southwest of the island, you can see many different types of floristic regions. The dry zone is more or less similar, and one of the reasons may be that it has been disturbed over so long with shifting cultivation in most of the areas that we don't really see the full picture of what would have been there originally. So taking the different ecosystems that we have, marine ecosystems, we have three: oceans, sea grass beds, coral reefs. Coastal ecosystems, we have seven, ranging from salt marshes to sand dunes in the coastal areas. Then the inland aquatic ecosystems, again, it's quite diverse, going from freshwater marshes to hot water springs and reservoirs which are man-made. Forest ecosystems too is quite diverse, ranging from lowland evergreen forests to montane forests, then to the moist evergreen or intermediate zone forests, dry mixed forests, thorn scrubs, and so on. And we also have what are called serpentine soils, where heavy metals soils determine what the vegetation is like. And grasslands too are of different types. So you can see 33 different types of ecosystems in the island. Some of them are internationally recognized, and the first of these is the World Heritage Sites, Singaraja, and the Central Highlands, internationally recognized. And then we have Man and Biosphere Reserves, three: Hurulu Reserve, Singaraja, and Kanneliya Dediyagala Nakyadeniya Complex. So you have two wet zone ones in Singaraja and Kanneliya Dediyagala Nakyadeniya, and one Hurulu, a dry zone one as well. Then Ramsar wetlands, we have 6 different ones, all in the dry zone. Then we have Asian Directory of Wetlands, where 41 different wetlands are recognized in the Asian Directory. And we have Ramsar, as you know, accredited city in Colombo. So when you compare India and Sri Lanka, southern, eastern side of India and Sri Lanka are so close together, and we have had a common past as well in this small area. One third of their area is 3,000 odd species. They have five, and the percent of endemics is 28 for us in the vegetation forest types, and they have 34% of endemics that are only found in India. Now, the factors contributing to Sri Lanka's high ecosystem diversity, if we consider, there are many. The first of these is the topographic heterogeneity of the land. We have what are called three peneplains, a lowland, mid area, and then we have a mountainous area, especially in the southwest of the country. So it is not just flat area altogether with the same kind of climate, but the climate also varies with the elevation. And the elevation gradient grows up to 2,524 meters. Then, additionally, we have 23 different soil types in the country. And so that is again a variation, and that also contributes to the differences in the vegetation. Varying distribution of rainfall and mist capture is also there within the country. And then we have intermittent land bridges between India and Sri Lanka in the geological past. So we have two monsoons, but the directions of these two monsoons are different. The southwest monsoon, as you can see, uh, brings rain actually to the entire country, and it has to cross over the hill ranges that are in the southwest and the central highlands, and then it moves on also to the wet zone. But the northeast monsoons that we receive are from the Bay of Bengal, and it brings less rain. At the same time, uh, because of the Knuckles mountain that is here, aligned in the south, yeah, it's perpendicular to the direction of the monsoons, and because of the Knuckles range, uh, less rain comes over to our side. Similarly, the southwest monsoons don't cross over that Knuckles range to the eastern side, and that the winds that go across to the eastern side, they are called Kachan winds. So, as I told you, Sri Lanka and Western Ghats are very close to each other, and you see the direction of the monsoons northeast, southwest in relation to Sri Lanka. And during the southwest monsoon, you see uh, the winds picking up rain, moisture from the ocean, and then when it moves towards the mountains, then most because of the upliftment, the moisture precipitates on the western side, and the rest moves on as a dry wind. So that is why in the eastern side you have a dry wind, and that which, as I told you, people call it Kachan winds. So the major ecosystems in Sri Lanka, we have the lowland rainforest. Then we have montane forests, and in the montane forests, if you look at the tree crowns, they are quite flat. Yeah. And then we come to Horton Plains, where we have both forests and grasslands there. On this side in the middle, we have intermediate zone forest, then dry forest, and going further on to the dry zone, the forest stature is quite different. And at the bottom, it's mangroves, sand dunes, and also coastal vegetation in the last one. So you can see even at this scale, there is a lot of diversity in the island. Then we move on to the distribution of endemics in the island, and the proportion of Sri Lanka's endemics in different forest types. First, two, the lowland wet evergreen forest, and the low montane forests together, they have 60% of Sri Lanka's endemics, and the montane zone has 34. So 94% of the endemics that Sri Lanka has are concentrated in the wet zone of the country. Whereas in the intermediate zone, dry and thorn scrub forest, there's only 6%. But when you look at the amount of forest that we have, lowland wet zone, in the far side map of Sri Lanka, you can see the amount of forest is extremely little. This is again the distribution of endemics. The as once again they are concentrated in the southwest of the country, and there is it's not as though the dry zone doesn't have endemics. They do have, but the amount is very little. Then, based on the distribution of endemics, the floristic zones have been identified, and you can again see that there are a lot of floristic zones in the southwest of the island. Yes. Then in this diagram, what we show is the distribution of endemic species among the trees, shrubs, and herbs. On the on your right side, there are seasonal zones: the dry zone, intermediate and dry, intermediate only, and lowland, uh, wet, intermediate, and dry. And there are the three squares that you see in each row represent trees, shrubs, and herbs, and you can see the values, numbers of endemic species in them are relatively low. And the same is true for the next intermediate and dry zones, and then again 2, 1, 2, and then again very low. But when you come to the seasonal or the wet zone of the country, montane and lowlands, and in the montane zone, you can see that the herbaceous herbs uh, have a very high endemic proportion in the country, and also a little bit higher proportions for trees and shrubs. And species which are common to the montane zone and lowlands, you have a fair amount. And when you come to the lowlands, it is among the trees that the endemic species are very high. So, like places like Singharaja, when they were logging, when they cut out the trees, then a lot of them would have been endemic species that were actually harvested. We are also very close to India, but only in the southwest these are concentrated. And when we look at the factors, what we see is these are diagrams which represent the climate in each zone. The northern intermediate zone on your left. The rainfall curve is given in the blue color, and the temperature curve is given in the red color. And you can notice that the graphs are drawn to a certain scale. 0 to 50 temperature is equivalent to 0 to 100 precipitation or rainfall throughout the year. And in the graph on the northern intermediate zone, you can see that the rainfall curve does not undercut the temperature curve. Whereas the diagram on the right showing the dry zone, you can see the rainfall blue line undercuts the red line, and in the during the November, December, January period, the precipitation is very high, greater than 100 millimeters during that period of time. When you come to the wet zone of the country, you can see that every month of the year we have greater than 100 millimeters of rain and much more. Now, if you compare similar diagrams to those in southern India, these are the same diagrams drawn to the same scales. And you can see in the whole of India, you never have a rainfall climate diagram like what you find in the southwest of Sri Lanka. So, climatically, the southwest of the island is really isolated, and that is also a contributory factor for having so many endemics in the southwest region. Another factor is that in the past, that is around over 70 million years ago, India and Sri Lanka were south of the equator, and then with time we were transiting to the north, and then eventually in around uh, 50 million years, the Indian plate actually collided with the northern plate. And in doing so, the Himalayas were formed, and the climate in the Indian subcontinent actually changed. But in the southwest of Sri Lanka, you can see the small green patch which remains, and that is an ever wet climate with a lot of rain. And that kind of climate is also similar to the climate in Southeast Asia. So the forest that we have in southwest Sri Lanka has affinities to the rainforest that we have in South Asia, and but not in the Western Ghats, because the Western Ghats must have been having forests similar to ours in the past when it was when it before colliding with the before the Himalayas were formed, but now we don't have that in the Western Ghats. Now we come to the endemic flora at the reserve level. These are the three, four diagrams you have seen earlier at different levels. So we come to the Singaraja area, and in the 1960s, the Singaraja had already been disturbed, and the reddish areas on this side at the bottom, they were China cultivated, and then after that shifting secondary forests grew back. On the northern side too, there was a lot of shifting cultivation, the grey areas. But in the central part, we had good forests, and that was like that in the 1960s. And the elevation note that it ranges from 200 meters on the western side to 1,300 meters on the Denyaya side. So it goes on, Singaraja extends. It's not in the same elevation area, but it increases in elevation towards the east. So the proportion of endemic species in three of these forests, Kottava, Kanneliya, and Gilimale, where I studied for my PhD, showed 59 to 67% endemic tree species, and in the middle one, individuals of endemics that make up the forest, and the wood volume, all are very high. Similarly, in Singaraja too, you have higher values, and the reason may be in the case of Singaraja because it is at a, I told you it's the elevation range is 200 meters to 1,300 meters. So because of that, you can have more endemics. Whereas the Kottava, Kanneli, and Gilimale ones, which were done earlier, was in one place. Then in the map, you see the blue dots that you have are the ones that were actually sampled in these different sites. And the red one is a 25-hectare plot which was studied uh, in detail, and I will show you the results of that in a few other slides. Then uh, we are also a partner to an international program. It's called the Smithsonian Global Earth Observation Program. 27 countries are participating. There are 70 study sites, and 6 million trees have been actually numbered, mapped, and so on. And everybody does everything the same way. They are also recensused every 5 years. So all these areas that are named on the map have plots in the tropics and subtropics. So people say this is the global stethoscope to check our planet's health, because so many countries are doing the same thing and examining what changes are taking place over time in these forests. This is our plot in Singharaja, the 25 hectare plot. You can see it is a stream runs down the middle, and the elevation range is only 424 meters to 575 meters. And each square that you see on the map on the right hand side is 20 meters by 20 meters, and there are 625 plots. And the elevation, lowest elevation and the highest elevation is 424 meters and 575 meters. And the slope can be either steep or less steep. And where the each plot can be also, like, it may be just a small spur like on the top of my hand, or it can be shallow a bit, and it can be concave. And that's the diagram that we have showing how the land surface is seen in a 3D map. So when we plot the species that we have, on your left side, it is tuna species, Batuna and Diana. Batuna in black, each dot represents a tree in this map. And you can see that those are arranged on what we call the spurs, on upper higher surfaces. Whereas the blue dots, the Diana, is arranged on the lower surfaces, and it beautifully fits in to the amount of water and dryness that you have in this landscape. On the other side, we have three shoria species. They are also big trees reaching the canopy, and once again they show distributions that are apart. The black one and the Megistophila one, purple ones, are restricted to certain areas, but you can see the blue dots. That species is found more or less all over. So that has a general distribution, whereas the others have specific sites where they actually grow best. Then that is the canopial species. Here we have Galkaranda and Kakirivara on your left, and black is Galkaranda, and the red is Kakirivara. So even in the understory of the forest, you have separations of species into specific areas. And on the other side, we have two Beru species. One is called Hundaberu, and the other is called Kunuberu. This is what the villagers have named them. And they say Hundaberu because those leaves are quite thick and they are used to thatch their roofs. Whereas the Kunuberu, the leaves are larger, much thinner, and they are not useful. So they have named. And you can see the red ones are near the stream in the middle of the map, whereas the blue ones, they are on the higher ground, and they are the ones that are used by villagers touching the roofs. These are understory and tree-led species. You get similar patterns for some species. So in the three layers, you can get of the forest, the canopy layer, sub-canopy, understory layer. The partitioning of space for different species is seen very clearly. So the others I will go through briefly. Horton plains, you can see distribution of grasslands and forests in the background there. And the one, what is in the middle was a agriculture, vegetable cultivation long years ago in the 60s. And the humps that you see is the natural vegetation now coming back into, after so long, coming back to the grasslands, that the area that was actually cultivated. And this is a similar picture that in that. And these are some of the species that you can see in Horton Plains very clearly. Rhododendron is natural to the Horton Plains, whereas the yellow one and the blue one, they have been they have escaped from botanic gardens and are growing also in Horton Plains. And here we have the forest dieback that you see in the canopy on the top picture. and that is on the eastern side of the reserve. And we don't know what will happen actually, whether the trees will completely disappear in this area with time. Then in the front and the bottom pictures, we have these tussock grasses and terraces. And they were once, in the middle one was where potatoes were actually cultivated, and now the tussock or bunch grass is coming back into that area. This is on the eastern side. So where we don't see dieback of forest still, but on the this is western side where you see peak wilderness, Siripada also there. The top one is towards the east, which is more dry. Okay, next we will see Siripada, Bambraputua, and upper areas of the Knuckles Range. They harbor montane forests at higher elevations. They also include the fair proportion of the island's endemics. These are some of the pictures of the Knuckles mountain range with many peaks, and then you have the Peak Wilderness mountain in the western side of the central highlands. Now we come to the intermediate and dry zone forests, and when we look at the vegetation that we have in the dry parts, number 1, 2, and 3 are their forest types. Intermediate forest, moist semi-evergreen, moist deciduous. Deciduous means they shed their leaves at some period of the year when it is very dry. Dry evergreen forest. Then you have thorn forest, tropical thorn forest number 4 in the extremes, northeast, northwest of the island, and dry Patana grasslands in the intermediate zone at the bottom here, and we have Damana grasslands in the dry zone. So even the grasslands are different from each other in different climatic zones. These the eastern slopes of the Knuckles, and it is also an intermediate zone forest. And when a student was studying the intermediate zone, he found this forest in Moraelle, close to the Knuckles area, and it's a relict of the forest that would have been there in the Dumbara Valley long years ago. But there is only a small area that is left. The black area on your left side in the diagram, it's the Knuckles range, and it is in this. The two red dots represent this particular forest, and that is a picture of the forest on the far side. And Morel rainforest is a small area, very thin area, but in the intermediate zone of the country, quite good rainforest. So early on, and the next one was Pinus plantation, where on the this is the forest, Morella forest, and it's a good rainforest. And here there is 115 of the 204 species that were recorded there are similar to Sri Lanka's lowland forests. So even in the intermediate zone, you can get a rainforest. So maybe in the past there were more rainforests there, but with time they have disappeared, and now what we have are dry intermediate forests there. Then we also have what are called ecotonal forests in the intermediate zone, and these are actually small hills, which we also call they're small hills that rise up from flat areas, and we have a large number in them. And when we look at 3 of them were studied in detail, where the stars are. They are like this. They are also called Inselbergs, and they are isolated small rocky hills and hill ranges with resistant rocks. Steep faces rise abruptly from the surrounding plains. And on the top, you don't see a lot of vegetation, but it's very sparse vegetation. And that vegetation is supported a lot by mist, whereas the ones at the bottom you can see much more, And there you have also the rains that come there also help to support it. But the ones on top are mostly uh, supported by mist. Three hills were studied. Doluwakanda, that is near Kurunagala side, intermediate zone. Then the blue one is Kokagala in the center there, and Monragala. These three were studied by one of the research students, and he finds that among them, the foothills vegetation in these three hills, they were more or less similar, and they were secondary in origin. Whereas in the on each hill, the undisturbed forest area, they are quite different from each other. Then also they have found of the total flora that is recorded in these hills, 28% of the Doluakan, or the 28 to 38% of the flora are common with the floras of the everwet lowlands and the lower montane region. So they have affinities to the wet zone forests, these species. And on each hill, there is one dipterocarp. Dipterocarps are only found in the southwest eastern part of Sri Lanka. And here too, you have one dipterocarp species growing in these uh, inselbergs. And these are some of the species that were found in these hills. And some of them are very rare. There are also new records, and some of them are first records for the century, like. Then the forest of the dry zone, Papa Margaritum is the one that I have shown here. And here you can see once it was a degraded area, but now it's converted into a dry zone forest. Yes. So those are some of our, lot of the ecosystems that we have in the island. And what are we doing? What is the Ministry of Mahavik Development doing? They are they have put out this book, which is called National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan, and they have given actions which can be done to conserve some of these areas. So these are all yours to enjoy, save, study, use, and also pass them on to future generations to come. Thank you.